Okay, we're on the internal storage. Everyone, the internal storage. It's everyone on my airplane. We're now recording on internal storage. You are on my airplane. I am Captain Landon, and we are traveling through the ethereal realms of my thought and even your thought, because my thought and your thought are sort of, in some sense at least, on some substrate, in the same kind of position with respect to the shit that kills us, the shit that loves us, and the shit that, because of us, is going to be better than it would have been if we weren't who we really are. But also shitty in some sense, in a strange, confusing sense, because of who and what we are, and it would be so shitty if it wasn't us who was feeling so shitty about it. So we are the subject of our shitty feelings, because we have shitty feelings, because we can be afraid and wet our bed and feel not right and shocked and all kinds of fucked up about various things, or just upset, if you will, not fucked up. Then we are responsible for how we feel. And if we weren't the kind of person who felt that way or thought that way, or responded to reality or judged reality a certain way, you might feel a certain way because you said to yourself, this is wrong. And someone says, if you hadn't really saw it as wrong, you hadn't acted this way because, whatever you felt about how wrong it was, your life would be better today. And I would say violence makes decisions for us, in many respects, about how life is going to be for us. At least it's indicative of a very strong desire possessed by other person or persons to tell us how we should think about a certain kind of way to think about what is real and good and bad for the rest of our life, if we know what's good for us. And you're really going to not want to do that. And you might have to put up a fight for the rest of your life. That's violence. And I know when I put it in those words, it sounds as scary and awful a fate as possible, which takes us, in this wonderful flight of hopefully joy from pain. It takes us across and into several different orders of human shock, ways of thinking about violence, and ways that, yes, if you weren't the subject of your emotions, or I wasn't the subject of my emotions, which attended with certain what you might call judgments or misjudgments about reality, or how to weigh certain things. If other people could relate to various things I call shocking and that have changed my life, they would say, well, if you didn't think about this way, your life would be completely different. And so your life, your wellness is up to you more than ever when you're raped. You have more power than ever to decide whether you're going to go the way of darkness and bitterness or the way of happiness and love. And so with this woman in this movie gets paraplegic, her mother, her father, and herself are slowly coming to the decision that this is not going to define the rest of our lives. And you'll see this in movies and fiction a lot. Like, we're not going to let this get us down. Right? I mean, all kinds of shit happens to people in movies and TV. Their husbands die. The woman, the love interest they just met, just had a head-on collision. Unfortunately, they jumped out of the car in time so they can finish the movie by killing everyone. Too bad they didn't get laid because she was really cute. Right? And so sex and death often become correlated in action films. The people that certain people want to have sex with die. That's got to feel kind of weird. And maybe it's never more sexy when you see her rolling around the truck or shooting through the front windshield. Think of the ways that women die in the movies. Love interest. I mean, James Bond never has the same woman from one movie to the next. What do you think fucking happens to her, right? I mean, even if she is the same woman, she's not the same woman. The whole idea about the lover is someone who's not quite who you thought they were, which is connected to death and sex and prostitution and how the deadly aspects of people playing roles around their sex organs. And the sex organs are like propped up in the middle of the stage, and all these things are going on in a movie around your penis, around your vagina, around your fertility organs, and around your brain. And they're doing a dance, and basically your genitalia is being sacrificed. So these actors can live their wonderfully prized royal lives under various aliases. That's what's happening in the theater, right? They're really actually destroying you and doing a ceremony to sacrifice your genitalia and its commensurate brain function and versatility and power and force, much as if we marshaled it one and together all over the world, no one would ever be able to hurt us again. The force of our own dicks and vaginas would make it so. Because we have this powerful creative force. Like we have all these rulers and all this control, and we have the sex organs. We're the ones that suffer dire by our own labors, by our own contracts with other people and our society and our tongue. But then you think about this word "are," and what people think is theirs. And I think that the argument could be made that in the modern era, in the last 1,000 years, human beings should be somewhat occupied in the course of protecting themselves from one evil or another with how we know that something really belongs to us. And what, if anything, has been robbed from us, along with learning whatever language we're learning about what does and does not belong to us. And think about what overall is taken from human beings that didn't used to be taken, and what humans come to give away only because it was first taken from them. Economic growth is predicated upon taking things from people. Every cult is parasitical. It is predicated upon the buildup and the release of a discharge that will distribute parasitical energy to the scapegoat and rob something from them. And so you have to have a police force, right? You could predict every law enforcement organization in the entire criminal justice system if you looked at the way that cults work. If the world is a cult, so it has to have what amounts to a police force, in as much as most groups have police officers, right? Just heard a branch snap. Right? Humans are policing other humans all the time. You can predict that there will be teachers that discipline other people's children, right? Because cults require stressing of the human organism, because cults are a stretch, and people get into cults because their family dynamic has been stretched. Their trust has been stretched. Their magical thinking has been stretched, whether they're circumcised or not. And at that point, it's really critical who you're around. And as in violence, the decisions that you make when you go to school, and all those decisions that you're making to make sure that you can survive in a world that now, doesn't necessarily speak your language. Life is not like it was when you were 3 anymore. And I could talk about many stories of growing up in my family where essentially what I'm talking about is like the environment or my life or the condition I'm in or dynamics, and what was love and safety has changed form and isn't what it used to be anymore. It's much more uncertain. It's been jeopardized, it's been endangered, it's been severed. I or it, I'll be saying I feel this way and I felt this way and I felt strange or I felt this. But all those feelings and non-feelings and numbness and paralysis, which nobody was noticing in my body language and the like, don't have a voice. And they're just mine. It's not the world around me. It's not information that could be contained in what makes anyone uncomfortable, much less stops the voice of man in a way that changes your body language. So that if you saw a picture of me when I was 16 or 17 or 18 or 25, you would say, "You look fucking nervous." You don't look comfortable in your own skin. It's like, to be that person that I am right now is scary. I was scared all the time, more than I realized. Just standing here is scary. I was here once, and because I was standing on this ground or looking at the sun or whatever I was doing, people called the RCMP on me. And it was connected to a woman who had already tried to sexually assault me. And she was staring at me from the other side of the river, like over a year later. And my heart was beating in my chest. Boom, 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 boom. And I got a severe headache that day. And I got approached by the police while I was walking home. And all these strange things happened. Bum, 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 bum. And the last time a white woman looked at me like that, from even several hundred yards away, an RCMP officer, again, approached me at the end of the day. Isn't that interesting? How responsive they are. I like that. That's responsiveness, isn't it? That's a real, like, nervous system. Stimulus, response. Stimulus, response. Right? What control did I have in that? What voice did I have? Now you've treated me like an animal. You've treated a human animal and a male like an animal, but you don't really respect even what an animal is. You don't know what you're doing. You don't guess what harm you've done to me. And when you've done harm, you're all too aware the person doing the harm, in this case a female, has no idea that they're even doing someone harm. They've lowered their inhibitions. They've scapegoated you. You deserve whatever you get because you spurned my advances, which were not, of course, advances, just the way she talks to people like you. And she had every right to. I mean, she's been interacting with young boys her whole life as part of her occupation. She can come up to them and talk to them whenever she wants. She has no normal, natural, female, adult, animal boundaries. And nor does her husband. I'm going to pack up and go. I don't like exposing myself here any longer, but like another place just over 100 feet from here, where I sit at the log regularly and make videos, I was sexually assaulted by another female who, interestingly enough, is connected to the RCMP. Not connected instances, except the fact that, they just happen to be in the same area. And what was interesting, too, is that I'd never met this other woman in the forest. She was previously, and sufficiently acquainted with me, and but not much at the same time. And she never usually walked over there and seemed disoriented and needed my help, which I gave her, even after she sexually assaulted me. Because, of course, what could I say? I let her know I was upset. She had emotionally bothered me. I was totally honest with her. I'm not sure if that makes a difference. Probably just makes it worse. And probably was vaguely in danger of harassing her or being seen that way. I would like to think of myself as an amateur social scientist or naturalist and a poet and a philosopher, but I dare say that to a lot of these people, they're always just going to think of me as a homeless person. And in as much as I stimulate their guile or their arousal, they're going to treat me in a way that, whether they intend it or not, or mean or not, is going to give evidence to me of disgusted and degraded things about their minds, regardless of whether I could put that into terms, even to my own satisfaction. It remains a distinctly disgusted feeling I get when dealing with any of them. And it's just a fact. From the moment you meet them, to the last time you see them, to every time you see them, they just give you a vaguely disgusting feeling. The great fear, of course, being that on some level, maybe they should feel the same way. And you should just stay away from each other. And this, for me, is almost entirely in a class of people whom the first time, like I've met women in the brush, in the forest trails. One woman, a middle-class white woman by herself with her dog, took great pains to let me know that she had a big boyfriend at home and, didn't need to spend too much time, even though, I was reclined and I was just completely in a submissive mode. The idea was that I had to make sure that she was safe from me. Okay, when she had more social power and physical dominance in that moment than I will ever have. But that's fine. And as she got the idea that I was a harmless passive male, she ventured to tell me her name and to ask me mine and started to become friendly. And that's their strategy. They're not really aware of it. That's what a lot of these types of female sexual predators do. Let's make sure that you're passive. I have a big boyfriend, so don't get any wrong ideas. But if I want to start thinking about hopping on your dick, let's get that rolling. Right? If they're safe, you should feel safe. Now they can initiate familiar contact. And I don't know if it's just the females around here, but that's how they behave. That's how the nicest ones behave. And to think that I grew up in their school system in Canada with white women telling me what to do and learning how to be sufficiently passive, right, to them. You know that I just want to say for the last 10 or 15 minutes, my balls have been hurting. Isn't that creepy? My right testicle. Yeah. Running into that psycho in the forest there. They're disgusting people. Let's see how it goes. Disgusting human being. And it's hard to hide my revulsion. What I'm learning to do is like not talk to the guy or just not give him any energy at all whenever I see him around. He'll never really learn because they are exactly who they are. They've worked to be who they are their whole life. And just think of the terrible thing it would be to be someone working hard as you have who strikes a person like me like a sexual predator every time I see you because your boundaries. Nobody wants to be that sick. I meet people throughout the year and throughout my life who are not like that and would never want to be like that. And you could tell they never would be like that. I met a nice German man once, and I don't know how we got to talking about bullying. I think because he was being bullied, and his wife was being bullied. And he said, we were chatting. He had a publication, and we were chatting a little bit. And he said, Landon, you would never do that to somebody. You would never do that. You would never bully someone. It was nice to hear that from a strong man like him. He was a farmer, I've had very few men in my life just take the time to tell me that I'm a trustworthy sort of person. It's nice. I have no danger of being overconfident, I assure you. No danger of that at all. But I just, being there, thinking about that woman and seeing that man today, just started a small anxiety attack while I was sitting in the sun. And I've been a little anxious all day. And the police make me anxious. I saw 3 of them yesterday driving up and down the highway. You would say it's strange, but I guess I've chosen, in some sense, I would choose such things to be very concerned about what the police do with their time because of all the stories I've heard locally. Usually from the kinds of people that I'm sure a lot of people would never talk to. Maybe just people on the edge. Poor people, you would say, or poor people like me. And I've been in their homes and I've heard their stories. And suffered in my way from certain disparaging types of behavior perhaps, but had some okay times along the way. Not people I would ever trust or could trust because I just don't fit in. And but learn things as you will. You take the time to talk to people, and we hear a lot of stories about being sexually abused by the RCMP. And I've never really had a strong opinion about the RCMP in one way or another. As I grew up, I didn't have much to do with them. My mom worked for them for a while. She lived with a female RCMP officer, and she never had any objections. She was a model. So, she worked in 2 fairly sexually aggressive industries, I would say. A lot of people are sexually aggressive and you'd say, well, they're just confident.
if you think of the high school system in the Western world, in the movies about high school, to be a confident person is to be a sexual person. Indeed, my sister was among the more popular, richer white women in her high school, and they were so sexually aggressive, they gave themselves a name, the Pretty Girl Gang. And I know from personal experience that they were pretty sexually aggressive for me, but would also be considered confidence for a young female, right? It's exactly what you need to be to succeed in the world. It didn't feel good to me. It always seemed like, if I was playing soccer when I was young or academics, no one really had a decided advantage over me. If we were wrestling with my friends on our trampoline, nobody had a particular advantage over to me, even my older brother at times. Play fighting up to a certain age. In high school, in wrestling, no one had an advantage over me, even though I was a young, skinny sort of guy, because I was used to using my body physically in that way, but up to a very amateur level, right? Just that young trampoline level. And it was like such an actually interesting, physically adept part of my life. It was amazing that no adult ever took an interest in it. And then I got older and sort of dropped it. Those types of things. But, I forgot why I started telling this story. Perhaps the thing that I really want to touch on is that physicality felt good to me, and I was good at it. But in many respects, socially or sexually, you would say, going to dances or anything like that, or we're forced to touch hands in high school for a square dancing unit, which I hated. And there was an intramural unit, which I hated. Oh, I hated them, all these things. Oh, God. And you look at what you hate that you have to do. And my hands were always cold and clammy. It was just such a painful experience for me. But, so I wasn't enjoying life physically at that point. Humans, you would say, or young people are developing sexual and social interests that are commensurate with being adults in the world. But that's all fiction to me. It's just pure fiction. I don't understand any of that. But I understand that the dominant fiction of the world has a decided advantage over me. The level of corruption which I have detected in local law enforcement, in the buses myself, combined with the anecdotal stories that I've collected throughout my life. And things that when someone tells you that an RCMP officer raped them and it was their dad or their mom, it's like when you meet people throughout your life wherever you go, you create some of the craziest fucking people are young female prostitutes whose parents are RCMP officers. And as I say, my whole body just goes numb. It terrifies me. It terrifies me. In the sense that if I may be forgiven for saying I've become a little more vulnerable like a native person or a native animal over the last 5 years in particular, while always remaining sensible of opportunities to hear more about the strictly native experience of the RCMP. And I've become, as I age, more and more terrified of them and what they could do to me, and what they would want to do to me, and the way some of them have looked at me, and what you can imagine they want to do to me, and the way no one else in the world has ever looked at me that way, but someone wearing the RCMP uniform, right? Or the uniform of a local bus driver, and how compatible these two agencies seem to be in what I would take to be a fairly antagonistic relationship to at least certain members of the public, who might be afforded the mercy of trying to identify who they might be themselves so they can avoid getting on the wrong side of any of these people just by being themselves, right? And having their extraordinarily stupid concerns about how any of these people are treating anyone else, right? You look into the deepest, darkest part of any township in North America, and a critical agency is going to be law enforcement in all of the organized crime, and all of the unorganized crime, and all of the prerogatives that people in certain groups are bound to take over other people. It's inevitable in the world. And if you've ever become one of those people, or you've tried to be vocal about those types of things, your life is less secure. You're probably someone that when an RCMP officer is involved in anything, you're the person they like the least. You're like that person, or you are that person, or worst case scenario, they've met you before. They didn't like you the first time, right? They don't like people like you, right? That doesn't make you an extraordinary human being in their eyes. It makes you a stupid human being, right? The RCMP and lots of law enforcement think that the only people who have any professional interest in the well-being of other people around critical and life-altering human conflict are people who are wearing a police uniform. They act like they're the only one who can see or needs to see the reality of the situation. It is an inevitable occupational hazard that they're going to become desensitized to lots of different kinds of things and lots of different kinds of people. It is inevitable when you're exercising a professional degree and a lethal degree of the suspension of disbelief that unholstering your weapon and pointing it at thousands of innocent people every year of certain races and discharging it to their death, right, is something that a human naturally wants to busy themselves learning how to do. And the rest of the human race, that it's good for them to do so. The numbers just don't bear out, even studied by the RCMP and by law enforcement doctors and PhDs. Right? It's almost not worth it, depending on which way you look at the situation. There's a local island of Lasqueti that doesn't allow RCMPs on the island. It's amazing that some human beings have been able to find this type of safety for their family. And these types of people, though many white women and RCMP officers should probably scoff, develop a very refined sense of how to deal with offenses in their community. And by and large, they're not looking to stalk or lynch anybody. I've lived in small communities on the islands, and there are some people who are just thieves. There's some people who are thieves. And not all those thieves should be arrested. Some of them are just straight up thieves. And they'll literally borrow something from you and be like aghast at your lack of development in understanding that you should be blessed by the fact that they borrowed it from you. And lead people into many unscrupulous activities. So the islands have space. They have social space. And just like when you see someone free enough to do things like that in a small, tight-knit community, you have to wonder what else goes on. Now, I don't think that Lasqueti has no problems, and I think it probably has an entirely different set of problems because there aren't as many inhibitions. But in any society, there's going to be changes in what is taboo, what the inhibitions are, what they aren't. And by and large, you hopefully just decide where you're going to live and how you're going to live, because you can't tell other people how to live. But in a lot of cases, we grow up and we don't get a chance to decide how we're going to live, because a lot of those decisions have kind of been made for us. Pretty soon, we're so behind the curve that our bodies are making decisions and making us depressed. And it's like, oh, you're just depressed because your neurochemicals are off, right? But what if your neurochemicals are off because you've been dealing with primal terror and wetting your bed all your life, and your serotonin is just so much sought after by different levels of your nervous tissue, there's not enough to keep you happy anymore. And so your own body can't keep you happy because you're trying to find so many different things that you don't have. I'm going to call my mom soon, see if everything's okay. Getting that feeling. Just gonna go do that. I'm feeling a little. I felt it yesterday. Now I'm feeling that, even though the sun's coming in now, I think based on people more than anything else. It's definitely a people-related chill, but we'll get through it. Let me see. I'm gonna start heading home soon. It's 12:47. I'll do call to mom. Please be good. Let's do it. This is a nice luxury. I didn't have this for the last month and a half. I eventually, what do you call it, hacked it. Tomorrow I'm going to be home all day.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
You know what? Your call came out on both phones.
Oh, it did this time.
They were both ringing at the same time. Isn't that crazy?
Gee, that must be interesting.